or not necessarily a printed, but a virtual copy of the presentation on SlideShare, and that will be available if you look for it on SlideShare. Because there are a lot of hyperlinks in here that will play different videos about different job search topics on resumes, cover letters, and applying online. So, all right. So let's get going. There are a couple of Zoom controls that you have that are available. And one of them is being able to chat, and you can kind of see that down here at the bottom of your screen typically. And when you do go to use that feature, it will basically have a little dialog box that pops up, and you can enter it into all panelists or all panelists and attendees. So it gives you an option to kind of communicate and ask a question as we proceed through the presentation. So just a little bit about myself. My background is in media and marketing research. I was a manager for many years, and that really empowered me to learn a lot about resumes, interviewing, hiring, firing, performance appraisals, basically developing talent for our organizations. Currently, I am a volunteer and a contractor with the McHenry County Workforce Network, very similar to the Job Center of Lake County, except just a little west. I do a lot of blogging. I also podcast with another individual whose name is Bruce Bixler. We podcast B Squared, discuss LinkedIn, and really give people some insights as to different aspects of using LinkedIn. And I do presentations like this for libraries, job clubs, and such, and we'll cover a little bit more of that later on. Just some general notes for today. My contact information is on the last slide. So if you really want a copy of this presentation, just let me know, send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to share that with you. This is kind of an interactive workshop, so you'll be able to ask questions. From time to time, there will be different red arrows that are on the screen, and that's really the focus of the discussion that is taking place. Now, normally I'll try this. Let's see if it, now I'm gonna, let's try it. I think I might have to share.
Monday.com is a platform to manage your entire marketing team, from content creation and strategic planning to client request.
Okay, I just kind of want to show that to set the tone of how things have changed so radically in the job search process and such. Um, it really has changed in the last few years. It's kind of an outline for today is we're going to look at different resume formats, and we'll explore the different components. I'll talk about some general points and mistakes. We'll talk about cover letters, kind of a standard format as well as a comparative style. And there's a couple of other types that are worthy of mention. And then we're going to spend a number of minutes looking at applying online. So many of the jobs that are available today are done by applying online. So we'll also look at identifying specific applicant tracking systems as well. So basically goals for today is to be able to identify the core elements of the resume and the cover letter. And then the other main goal is to really restate job responsibilities or duties into a star. And a star is basically a situation or task that you're faced with in the job, and then the action that you designed or implement and the results that you produce with that action. So stars: situation, task, action, results. The other big goal for this is also the use of job boards and employer applicant tracking systems. Really getting an idea of how those function and work. And the bottom line for writing your resume, doing cover letters, applying to different companies is really knowing yourself and what you really bring to the table. So of course, one resource that's available online is the Illinois WorkNet Center. There's a hyperlink to it. Here there's a section for job seekers that offers you a lot of different information and capabilities, whether it's finding a job or networking for success, or even writing your resume and such. Up here is a hyperlink to an article that they made available earlier this year in terms of safety tips. Basically, when COVID hit earlier this year and people started losing their jobs left and right, scammers then started to really target people who were out of work. So if you get an offer that somebody's willing to hire you, or we have a job offer for you, just send us the $50, and anything along those lines are probably a scam. So just be cautious and aware of it. And then, of course, another really important resource is your computer, and whether you use Google to Google different questions or even YouTube to understand how you might actually answer or respond to different questions in an interview. For example, here I just typed in resumes and cover letters and came up with a lot of different examples from career coaches and such. And Andy here is one that I've played from time to time. In fact, I won't play this during the session today, but I do have this hyperlinked, a 4-sentence cover letter. And then also Professor Austin, Heather Austin here, she writes a lot of different things and produces quite a bit of content as well. And of course, with Lake Villa being in the Lake County area, the Job Center of Lake County, this is a hyperlink to that as well. And again, they offer a lot of different services that can be useful. So not all resumes are created equal. And I kind of talked about that a minute ago with the paradigm for job searching changed radically in the last 20 years. I mean, figure literally 20 years ago, you could answer an ad in the newspaper and still find a job. Today, that's not really the case. Things started shifting to Career Builder and then Monster.com. And then a few years further, LinkedIn started to be a player, and then Indeed and ZipRecruiter. And so everything's really gone online pretty much. The actual walking up to a company and applying there inside is really the very rare exception the norm is really applying online. So 7 seconds, if you remember that little video I played, the goldfish has an attention span of 8 seconds. The human has 7 seconds for their attention span. So that really makes it imperative that you have a compelling resume that really captures a person's interest. And of course, I do run into people from time to time that say, I've sent out hundreds of resumes. I haven't gotten any response. And my first question would really be, are you sending the same resume out? And invariably, the answer is yes. And I have to be honest, one resume really does not work in today's job search process. The resume really needs to be customized to fit the job posting. Keywords and skills from the job description must be in your resume. If not, odds are it's never going to even be picked up or looked at or reviewed by a human being. And of course, a lot of times people like to get creative with their resume and such, but detailed work experience by dates is usually how most people in the HR industry are looking for it. And again, all of this is only possible through your own self-awareness. What do you really bring to the table? And of course, many times I run into people who are early on, they've just graduated from college, they're not sure what they want to do. And then 30 years later, when they're in their 50s or even 60s, they're still trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up. So kind of identify different job titles that you might want to be involved in and work at. And then try and determine some target companies that actually offer those kinds of job titles. And ideally, you have those skills that are needed for those jobs. If not, or even as an exercise, create a spreadsheet that lists all those skills out. And you can discover what skills are required. Do you have all of those skills? If not, how do you go about getting them? Is there additional education or training? Or maybe you just need even more experience on the specific job that you're looking at. Now, this video, Catherine Breet Byers suggests 3 simple steps. She kind of outlines and discusses this in a little bit greater detail. But again, it really is important for you to identify all the skills that you bring to the table. And I'm not talking 5 or 10 skills. I'm not talking 10 or 20. You probably have 50 to 80 job skills that you never even really considered a skill. So it's important to understand that. So there's basically just a few types of formats. You have your standard chronological format, where it usually lists your experience, and it's usually done in a historical perspective from latest to oldest first. Functional, where that might be for the more mature worker, if you will, who has 30 or 35 years of experience. And so rather than list all of those companies and times, they really highlight the skills and sort of downplay the specific companies and such. There's also a blended, kind of a combination of the first two. And then for less tenured employees, usually college graduates or other individuals, there's the infographic, which tends to be a little more colorful and creative than a standard chronological resume. And then, of course, there's a plain text format that might be necessary for some applicant tracking systems. So let's take a look at some of these specifically. And so I'll share with you a chronological resume that I used a few years ago. And just to give you an idea, here I've got the header information. I have a address, phone number, email, and my LinkedIn URL, which makes it easy for a recruiter or talent acquisition specialist to actually look at my LinkedIn profile. And then here there's a professional summary, some business experience where it talks about doing BAB consulting, which I've done for a long time. I worked at the local Staples here in McHenry until they closed their doors. And then we get into more of my professional career as Vice President of Client Services and account executive at Synovate and being a VP. And here you can see my education is clearly labeled at the University of South Florida. And in addition to my degree, many companies will send individuals to different seminars and workshops, some even gaining credit and such. Continuing education units, I think they are, CEUs. So those are important to list as well, because your education doesn't stop once you graduate from school. Now, we'll take a look at the skills format, and you can see how vastly different it is. And again, here's some contact information, but here are like 5 different job titles that might be appropriate for me. And then here's a listing of different skills. And rather than a professional summary, I take some of those different skills and actually have a little narrative about them. Team management, marketing research, ops leadership, startups, and then selected achievements and skills. And then on the second page, I still have my education listed. And then here's the career history, which basically talks about the different companies I've worked at. Now, this is usually used by more mature individuals, and I'll say it out loud, older workers. Unfortunately, most human resource and applicant talent acquisition people don't like that format. In fact, I've actually used that and been requested to send them a regular resume, believe it or not. So it does happen. Now we didn't open up that file. Let's try that again. Infographic format. And again, this is something that's a little newer, and you can have this on different paper. Here you see the name of the individual in really bold up at the top. They have different positions that would be appropriate. In some cases, I actually see a photo of the individual up here. And then over here on the left, we've got some contact information, a professional summary or profile description, skills and strengths over here on the left tab, and experience then on the right. And then there's also some education here and a second page that replicates the contact information, but then offers some technical skills in addition to the soft skills that they talked about. And so, you know, a young college graduate might use this, a young professional who doesn't have a lot of tenure and work experience in the workforce might use something like this. And then a plain text format really has all of the different formatting stripped away from it. In an actual text file, this line here wouldn't be returned into 4 or 5 lines. It would be one straight continuous line. In some applicant tracking systems or some company just ask you to upload or copy and paste a plain text document. And this is kind of how it would look. All the underlining, the bolding, all of that would be stripped away from the file. The one problem with this format is a lot of times it does get corrupted when transferring or copying and pasting. For an example, like this bullet point here, the asterisk, might actually end up over here. So it's always advisable when you copy and paste a resume into an applicant tracking system to be able to review what you actually pasted, how it actually ended up. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Some of the different components, you're going to want your name. And usually that's going to be in a much larger font. Address. And of course here, it's different today than it was a few years ago. I think more people are security conscious. So it's okay to not necessarily put your address specifically on a resume. And one example would be is if you have a bunch of copies printed up and you're in a job fair and you're handing those out like Halloween candy, then yes, maybe leave that address off versus uploading it to an applicant tracking system for a company. Then maybe you have your address on that. Also, you want a contact information, a phone number. And instead of using periods, which have become somewhat prevalent in the last few years, stick with the standard format of just dashes and really only give them one phone number. You want an email address. You want your LinkedIn URL if you have one. And in terms of the email address, one of the things that's kind of important too is that it's a very neutral sounding email. So like, for example, my Gmail address is Bennett73. One time when I was at Staples and I'm reviewing resumes and such, somebody's contact information was ItalianPrincess@hotmail.com. Now that didn't necessarily raise a red flag, but it didn't really provide a very, how can I say this? It didn't really encourage me to read a whole lot further. So next section should really be a career or professional summary, which is kind of like an elevator speech scripted out, much shorter. You're only going to use maybe 2 or 3, maybe even 4 sentences, but it's going to contain the different skills and keywords or buzzwords that are appropriate for your industry and the kind of position that you're going to use. And of course, a lot of times people tend to fall into cliches. This is a great time to avoid using those cliches in your career or professional summary. You need to be concise and on target. So work experience, you want to list your company, your job title, dates, and especially in a format where you're listing the month and year. You don't necessarily need to have specific dates like November 7th, 1997, but November 1997 is appropriate. In some cases, if you have a little known company or industry, you might want to have the address, the web address of the company, or a short little description. It depends upon how much real estate on that piece of paper you're willing to give up for about the company. And a lot of times, people list responsibility or duties included, and that's not really the way to format it or tell about yourself. You really want to have your achievements in your work experience. And a lot of times people work at a job for 5, 10, 15 years, and they kind of like are almost on robotic mode and forget about what they've actually done, or sometimes have a hard time. So it's always helpful to pull out some of those performance appraisals that you've received over the last few years to get a refresher of some of the things that management or your supervisor really were impressed with or really felt that contributed to the organizations. And those are the kinds of things that you want to put in your work experience. It may go without saying, but you really want more bullet points for your current position versus the position that was 15 or 20 years ago. So you really want to think about stars or cars. Again, that situation or task, action, results. And some job coaches and stuff think of cars, the circumstance, action, and results, but they both have the same intention. So the work experience is really a critical portion of your resume. Yes, the company and the time that you worked there, but it's really what did you do? And so let's think of quantifying or recognizing the experience that you've done. So let's take a look at a person who's in charge of accounts receivable or accounts payable. So I maintained accounting records for accounts receivable and accounts payable. So what? So maybe a way to really state this and make it a little more impactful is managed 1,000 plus AR and AP accounts working directly with the CFO. So now we've taken that simple statement, quantified it, put in a metric of having over 1,000 accounts, and established that we have a reporting relationship with an officer of the company. So between the two, the latter one is more impactful. Another quick example. I answered the phone. Well, everybody answers the phone at work. But some people, especially in a customer service role, have a more intense work experience where they might be resolving customer issues through inbound calling system, averaging 60 calls a day. Again, providing some metrics and resolving customer issues, not problems, not complaints, but issues. So a more neutral or positive impression and such. One could expound on this and say escalating those that need extra attention from a manager or officer of the company. Now, when I worked at Staples, I sold computers and printers to customers. And I would say, is that what I did? No, not really. What I did was I practiced consultative sales techniques to provide customers with their hardware and software needs. A lot of times people would come in, want a color laser printer. And of course, the color laser printer is a high-end item, anywhere from $500 to maybe $1,200. And so first off, I would say, well, how many reams of paper do you go through in a month? And they said, well, you know, I go through a ream of paper about every 3 months. At which point I would say, well, you know, we can, let me show you a couple of inkjet printers that produce laser quality imagery at a fraction of the price. You know, somebody may want to come in and get an elephant gun to capture a mouse. Well, it's like, no, you don't need that. What you really need is a mousetrap. And then, of course, years ago when I was at Nielsen, I managed and supervised 10 staff members. And of course, that's what I did. But that really doesn't say much, although there is the metric here of 10. But what I ended up in really doing is coaching and developing 22 direct reports into supervisory role positions. And that's more impactful from the standpoint of identifying talent and then nurturing them through their career and having them become very valuable employees for the organization. So the other resume components that you should include are accomplishments. And again, some individuals will say you have that as a separate section, but I would encourage people who have done that to really put those accomplishments in with their specific work experience. Education should be clearly labeled, whether it's college or seminars or workshops or maybe special training or licensing that you've had to have. Especially in the IT world, there are so many different certifications. In fact, I was reviewing somebody's resume last week, and the certifications was almost a half a page long. But those are important to his specialty and training. Military experience. Don't know if there are any veterans in the group, but it's important to kind of relate how your military experience is relevant to your current industry. At the very least, have your rank, some of the duties or responsibilities, relevant experiences that you had in the military. Also, any kind of technical or computer skills are important in today's business world. Sometimes you're involved in the community, or you have volunteer experiences from maybe a wildlife sanctuary to maybe United Way, or maybe in terms of community activities, maybe the Lions Club, or maybe the Rotary, those types of things all kind of point to an individual who should be able to land a job because of their teamwork and their activities. Okay, just some general points. White space. A lot of times people try to squeeze too much onto a page. And so it's important to have a certain amount of white space that breaks up the different components within your resume. And again, applying online, stick around to the end. We'll talk more about that. The debate is never going to end about whether one page or two-page resume. If you've only been out of school for a year or maybe 5 years, one page is probably it. If you've been around for 15 or 20 years, yeah, you can get away with 2 pages, but I wouldn't do any more than that. Font consistency is important. Many times I'll be reviewing somebody's resume and they might have Arial at one point, New Times Roman in another. So it's really important to have that font be the same for the entire document. Now, it's okay to have different size formats, like at the beginning with your name, you may have a font size of 20 or 16, and the rest of the document might be 12 or 11. Printed white paper, 20 pound, is pretty standard to have, especially if you're going to a job fair. That's very easy to use. If you're going to an interview, even though you've already sent them your resume, you may want to end up in printing your resume out on some nice resume paper that's a little thicker, 32 pounds or maybe 36. That will literally stick out from the rest of the ones that are on a 20-pound paper. Now, here's a couple of different videos. I won't play them now, but they'll be available for you to review later. John Marty is kind of cute. He's there with his 5-year-old son. John does offer a lot of different job search advice. In this one, he talks about 5 different points on a resume, and we've kind of covered most of those. So now, typical resume mistakes. Typos is one, and it's easy to make a typo. We all do it. It's sometimes beneficial to have another person look at it to see if they find something that you overlooked. The proverbial can't see the forest for the trees. Another huge mistake that I see on several resumes is having an objective. That screams old school. An objective has gone out the way. You all have an objective to find a job. What you really need is the professional summary that kind of highlights what you have to offer a company and such. Another huge mistake I see probably at least a third of the time is references available upon request at the end of the resume. That's a given. You don't need to state it. And while we're talking about ABCs or references, I'll talk about my ABCs. And think of it this way. There are different levels of references. And the B and C references are ones that I've either known through work history or personal reference that know I may be in job search, that I've talked to about maybe using as a reference. And if I'm applying online and a company says, hey, give us 3 references, I'd be more than tempted to use the B and C references because I wouldn't have to worry about them giving me a good reference that I know that they would. Versus I'm in an interview situation and that company is like an ideal position. That's when I would pull out the A reference of the senior vice president or officer of a company or manager, my direct manager, that I know is going to give me a good reference. And once I give that individual's contact information up and I leave that interview, I'm going to be calling them right away, letting them know, hey, John, I just applied at XYZ company. And this is the role that I applied for. I know we've talked in the past about you being a reference for me. Please let me know if they do call you. So again, some of those references you want to use very often, but there's other references that you want to use only for those ideal positions. So another typical mistake is listing a home and cell phone number. You really only want to offer them one number, and probably your cell phone number. The other thing too is you don't even really need to label it as the cell phone or even phone, because if you use that 10-digit string of phone numbers, everybody knows what that is. In some cases, people have been in their industry for 25 years and they think that that's an advantage. Wrong. It's a disadvantage because people will think that you are an older worker. Extensive experience, accomplished executive or accomplished salesperson. There's many ways to tout your experience, but numerically labeling it can send a red flag. One resume writer that I've talked with and collaborate with from time to time has even said even 15 plus years of experience can raise a red flag. So be cautious about that. Another big no-no is trying to put a 3-page resume on 2 pages. And I see that occasionally. People eliminate the white space. They go with a smaller font, like a size 9, so they can get it on 2 pages. They'll make the margins real wide, but that works against you. The thing to do would be eliminate some of those bullet points, especially for the older positions. Distracting formats or fonts. Sometimes templates tend to have a lot of different formatting or unusual fonts. So you really want to kind of stay in a standard mode. And then also they avoid using the overused responsible for or duties include. Those types of things really don't benefit your resume. Now, in order to fine-tune your resume and make it really shine, there's a couple of things you can do. Number one is using the Chrome extension of Grammarly. And, you know, sure, you might be creating your document in Word, and Word has all kinds of spell checks and stuff, and it does grammar. But quite frankly, the spell check on Word will not distinguish between their, T-H-E-R-E, and their, T-H-E-I-R. Words are totally different, but the Word document spell check does not do that. Grammarly does, and it's a free extension that you can use. You can use it online, and you can also add it into your Microsoft Office. So it's a great little additional tool that will help you. Now, there's another very important aspect in today's job search process that is very helpful, and that's different job sites that you can go to and have a scan done of your resume against a job description. And it really empowers you to get past the applicant tracking system robots. And right now there are these 3, and that we'll kind of explore all of them, but jobscan.co is the first one. And then there's also the Professional Me, which I think this is more of an Apple kind of thing, but it does work with a regular PC or Android. And then there's also Skill Syncer. And this is how JobScan works.
Online listings make applying for jobs easier than ever. So why aren't you getting a response from employers? Easy applications means more applicants, which means more competition. Leading companies use automated software tools called applicant tracking systems, or ATS, that weed out many resumes before they even reach.
Oh, all right. Let's try that again.
Applying for jobs easier than ever. So why aren't you getting a response from employers? Easy applications means more applicants, which means more competition. Leading companies use automated software tools called applicant tracking systems, or ATS, that weed out many resumes before they even reach a real person. So how do you cut through the noise? With JobScan. JobScan uses artificial intelligence to get your resume past the filters. We've reverse engineered their systems to create an intelligent tool that provides proprietary insights to optimize your resume at a much deeper level. So you can tailor your resume for each job based on precise keywords and skills most valued by the company. JobScan can even optimize your LinkedIn profile so company recruiters find you before you even know they're looking for your skill set. Let JobScan maximize your chances with every application. Register for your free account and run your first scan today.
Okay. So we're going to explore this a little bit more because I think it's very important to customize your resume for job descriptions or for specific job descriptions. And again, that goes back to the individual who has sent out dozens, hundreds of resumes and never gotten a call. If you're sending out the same thing, it's never really going to work. So this is the URL for the company. You can do several scans a month free. And it basically looks like this. You can try a sample resume and job. It also offers a LinkedIn optimization as well. So getting past the resume robots is the main thing with jobscan.co. And the other thing, when you click on try sample resume and job, you get a screen like this where you paste or upload your resume on one side, and then you paste the job description on the other. And so once you've done that, you hit scan, and then it actually comes up with a score. And there are different things that it will help you identify and such. So as I click on the next slides, it's basically going through the different screens of the report. So the next screen really talks about, hey, I'm missing two high important value skills. I didn't have a job title in them, a matching job title. Here, this is a really important one, applicant tracking system tip. So if I can add in a company name and the URL for the web address of this job description, I can get some specific tips. Oh, I can do that. So I did. And the screen changes to this, where I put in Echo Incorporated as the company, and I typed in or copied and pasted the recruiting.com URL. And so it identified this system as UltiPro, which is a system I had never heard of. And then it provides some specific tips for this particular set ATS. They found my section headings okay, but one thing they faulted on my resume is that I didn't have the correct or any kind of date formatting that they recognized. And in my resume, it basically just lists the year, but they're looking for month and year in almost any kind of format. Scrolling on down, it talks about the word count. It talked about measurable results. there are 5 or more mentions of measurable results, or metrics, if you will, about the results that I had on the job. And of course, there's a hyperlink on the document or the report that will take you to those. Job level match, words to avoid. My tone on the resume was good. And then now we get into some of the specific things. And of course, to get more specific information, they want you to subscribe to it, but a free account will work really well for you. Education boost. Hey, I went to a well-known school. And actually, University of South Florida plays Notre Dame tomorrow. Should be a good game. Then it starts listing the specific skills. And you can see that skills that I'm missing on my resume that are on the job description are marked with a red X. So technical. And this was a position that was like a trainer kind of role. And it was a great exercise for me to go through, even though I really wasn't applying for it. It was more designed to go through the exercise, capture some screenshots that I can share with you. But it really was an eye-opener because throughout my entire career, I've always been very technically oriented and done a lot of training. Also doing a lot of computer maintenance as well. Now robotics and video, I don't think I can ascribe to. And there are a lot more keywords, hard skills, that will be displayed when you say show more. So it quickly identifies some of those key skills that I can add into my resume and raise that score from a 35% up to an 80 or maybe 90%. Next slide talked about proficient. Well, that was in the job description, and I can honestly say I would never use proficient in my resume, but at this point, with this information, I might say I'm proficient with Microsoft Access, because that gets the word used, and I feel I might be a little bit more in tune with Access, but I'd be willing to make that assumption. Some other keywords, training materials. And this really blew me away because it really talked about that on the job description 3 times and was never on my resume. But yet I've done training material design and writing for decades, but I never had it on my resume. Who would have guessed? Who would have known? So it's a great way to understand and identify things that will help you improve your opportunities in applying to a position or a job. Now, another example is the Professional Me. And this is the website. You can log in or sign up. And again, you can do this for free. And same kind of format. Copy and paste your resume, copy and do the ad. You hit submit, and it runs a scan for you. And it provides a little bit different format, but again, still identifying some of those keyword matchups and such. And so here you can see job ad occurrences and resume occurrences. And another thing here, it goes through and lists things that are in the job ad and highlights those that are not on your resume. And then it actually goes through and highlights those in the verbiage as well. So it's a little bit different format. I do prefer JobScan, but I could be convinced to try other ones like SkillSyncer here. And again, here they got, try it for free. Why wouldn't you try it? And again, so I have created an account with that. I can receive 1 additional scan every Monday. And so using the same format, same resume and same job description, here it gives me a score of 32. And so hard skills match was 7%, soft skills 6%, and other keywords match 34%. And so over here on the right side of the screen, it lists all those keywords, these hard skills, and identifies all the ones that I was missing. And then it changes to the soft skills and such. And of course, communication, collaboration, cooperation, leadership, all of these are skills that I could very easily add in the right spot in my resume and greatly improve my chances. And of course, here's now the other skills and such. So this is nice. I do like this graph that they show. And of course, you can see how far off most of the keywords were. I don't think this was the Echo job, but I could be wrong. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, was the Job Scan, the Professional Me, and Skill Sinkers. All are tools that empower you to develop and fine-tune your resume to more closely match a job description. And when you can do that and you can get a score of 80, 90, 95%, I wouldn't even bother shooting for 100, but you want to be up there in the higher percentile, which would enable you to get past the applicant tracking system. Now let's talk a few minutes about cover letters, because that's another important aspect. And there's always going to be a debate. Should I include one or not? And of course, I would say include one. Now, the Society for Human Resource Management did a survey some years ago, back in 2014, that's almost 6 years ago, and they asked the question to some of their members, do you consider it a mistake when a candidate leaves out a cover letter? Well, almost a little over three quarters of the respondents said, no, it's not a mistake. But almost a quarter of them said, yeah, it's kind of a mistake. But I looked at that and thought, you know, this doesn't seem right. It seems kind of stale. So I looked for some other information, and Donna Salvi, an avid careerist, talks cover letters, and this is the article to her thing, and I borrowed her slide. The percentage of tech companies demanding a cover letter, and this was from last year, tech giants, half of them are looking to have a cover letter. And even medium-sized companies, over half of them want it. But even a fast-growing startup goes from a half to almost 2/3 of them wanting a cover letter. So what function does a cover letter serve? Well, it kind of introduces you to the recruiter. It really kind of can talk about how you found the position or state your interest in it. Why does it interest you? And then relate why you were a good fit. And here's a little video from Zip Job on how to write a cover letter. It's a little cartoon. I'm not going to play it now, but if you want to view it later, you can. And what a cover letter does is really provide an additional means of communication. Maybe you can explain a gap in employment. Maybe you had to take care of a parent in declining health. Maybe there was a medical leave, any number of different things that might have caused a gap in your employment history. Definitely want to relate why the company or position interests you. And you want to be able to kind of talk about some relevant experience within the job or the industry. You could even add a couple of bullet points, but you really want to keep it short, no more than a couple of paragraphs. And Andy LaSavita really does a good job here in talking about the 4-sentence cover letter. You can do it in 4. I would think that most cover letters would have a few more sentences than that. But there's really basically the traditional format of a cover letter. a newer format that's called a comparative style. And then there's also the pain letter that Liz Ryan talks about. She's an influencer on LinkedIn, and her description of the pain letter is basically something that in your job search mode, you have a certain amount of skills that you have acquired, and you're able to identify the pain that an existing company that you want to apply for is going through. And you direct and write that cover letter talking about your experience and how you relieved the similar pain of a company that you worked for with your experience. And I think the example that she uses in her mock cover letter is that a person was going to apply to a company that just went from a regional to a national, and this individual had similar example or similar history of going from a regional to a national company as a service manager, customer service manager. So the pain letter can be very impactful. It's just a different style or format, if you will. So here's a couple of different examples. Now I used these several years ago. I would make them much shorter today than I would have back then, but the header information up here matches my resume. And I have the company name and individual, and sometimes you don't always have that. So instead of Mr. Sagona, you might have Dear Talent Acquisition Manager or what have you. But I really talk about the position first, like in the Hills Village part-time economic coordinator is a great background with my government service and private sector experience. And then I name drop because the attorney for our village works for the firm that is the attorney for Lake in the Hills. So Lake in the Hills uses Zerkowski, Rogers, Flood, and McCardle. So I kind of created that name dropping as a means of verifying, hey, just ask your village attorney that he can ask his man, so to speak. So I talk a little bit about my background, have a few bullet points, but the real thing here is the closer. If you're looking for a committed leader with strong relationship building skills, then I close it with, I look forward to discussing how my background is a match for this opportunity and call you the afternoon of March 22nd to follow up. So I specifically draw a line in the sand to say, I'm not waiting on you. I'm going to call you and find out where you at in the application or candidate selection process. Or it might even be simple. Did you receive my application or my resume and cover letter? This was a situation, I think, back then when people were still using faxes, which you might find today, but it's not as prevalent today as it was a few years ago. Now, here's another example, and this was for a job that I found on their corporate website. It was the parent company. And I talk about the specific, and the information I want to relate to you is highlighted in yellow. It wasn't on the original. But, you know, I found the job ID and on your home website. Great match with your staffing needs. Again, today's environment, I would probably delete these two paragraphs altogether. But I would definitely leave this in because on the job description, it talked about BPA worldwide brand reports. And I had some experience with those. And I did get called in for several interviews. So this did work. And again, down here at the bottom, I use that same technique of look forward to discussing how my background is a match, and we'll call you on March 23rd. Now, in this particular situation, I didn't have to call them. They called me first. And actually, Miss Paul Lorecki called me and asked me if I could send them a regular resume because my skills-based format they didn't like that so much. So Again, ended up with 3 different interviews. They moved in a different direction, but clearly my cover letter and resume worked. Now, there's also the comparative cover style cover letter. If this is an example of where you have the job requirements on one side and you have a matching bullet point with your background on the other. And if we take a minute, I'll talk about this one specifically. This is one that I actually used. And again, matching bullet points for the experience. And within 24 hours, I got a call from the headhunter saying, hey, this is a great match. I'm going to present you to my client. So this can be a great format. Now, you might say, oh, but in some job requirements or job descriptions, they have a real long laundry list of what they want. Well, yes, that's probably true. But if you highlight several of the important ones and have the matching experience, that's going to be good enough. Okay. Now let's talk about the applicant tracking systems. Now, Taleo is featured here in the center because they have the lion's share of the market. There's well over a couple of hundred of different applicant tracking systems. Taleo's probably the most. SAP is a newer entry into the market. ISOMs, yeah, they've been around for quite a while too. And HR Smart, Connexa, Brass Ring, it goes on and on and on. Basically, an applicant tracking system is used by almost all major companies. And an applicant tracking system is just a small part of human resource information systems that different vendors offer companies. And it really is the kind of software that enables the electronic handling of all HR documentation. And that includes like benefits, onboarding, hiring, firing. Think of it as a cradle to grave capability for the system. You know, even tracks hiring compliance for a company. You know, you get to the end of an application, it says, you know, what is your gender? What is your race? Are you a veteran, Hispanic descent, yada, yada, yada. And basically that all goes into, are they compliant with EEO? So the biggest complaint about applicant tracking systems is that it takes the human out of human resources. So how does it work? Well, basically, it takes your resume and parses the data into their system. And it literally scans your resume to qualify you as a candidate or to eliminate you as a candidate. Because it's basically going to be just like JobScan and match keywords in the job description against your resume. And there will be probably a set threshold that you have to be at 80% to even get past or even be in the consideration pool. For an example, like when I was at Staples, they used Taleo, and people would be identified color-coded wise as either green, yellow, or red. And so candidates who were labeled green successfully passed the scanning process and they passed the assessment test. Now, people who were labeled with a yellow colored code they passed, but they weren't the ideal fit. You could still talk to them if you couldn't find anybody in the green that was still available and was interested in working. But the red candidates, the candidates who were marked in red, failed at the scanning or the assessment test. You couldn't even talk to them. Even if they had come into the store, you would talk to them. They seemed like a viable candidate. You even thought, just from your early description and discussion, you'd want them to come on board. If they came up red in the system, you couldn't even talk to them. So that's how it really kind of ranks and such. So the system does many tasks. It can automatically identify the top candidates, reject the unqualified. If you ever receive the note, thanks, we'll keep your application on file. You probably didn't make the scan. The system can send out applicant emails. We'd like to have a discussion. Would you be available to talk on X night at 5 p.m.? So it can kind of schedule different interviews and stuff. It could also be part of the onboarding process as well. So you've successfully gone through some interviews, you've gotten a phone call, hey, we tentatively like to offer you a position based on a good background check and a drug screen process. And we'll be sending you a note, reply back to it quickly so that we can get the process started. So again, it does everything from tracking reviews, promotions, and terminations. There are some pitfalls. Some applicant tracking systems cannot read a PDF. So unless specifically directed to submit a PDF, submit a Word doc. And I would go with the older format, Word doc, not docs. And I talked earlier a little bit about resume templates. ATSs do not like templates because they usually come with a lot of formatting. There might be borders around it or dark lines that separate sections and stuff like that. Another major issue is they can't read multiple columns or a table. So if a lot of times I'll see people who have a resume where they've created a nice little table with maybe 4 or 5 lines long, and there's 3 different columns, and it lists all their skills. The system isn't going to be able to read that. Now, this doesn't happen too often, but once in a great while, somebody will put their contact information in the header of a Word document, and the system cannot read that as well as the footer. And misspelled words are not recognized. And again, that goes back to maybe using Grammarly, because if you spelled manager, M-A-N-G-E-R, the system will not recognize manger as applying for the manager role. Single column format, avoid those tables and columns. Avoid all kinds of lines and borders, even underlining for like your hypertext, for your email, and for any kind of URL that you might put in there. Everything should be left justification except maybe your contact information at the top of the page. And another idiosyncrasy of applicant tracking systems are serif fonts are not accurately read. So if you're using Times New Roman, do yourself a favor and change to a sans serif font. And these are just several of them that are listed: Arial, Helvetica, Futura, Gotham, Circular. And size does matter. I referenced earlier that some people will use like a size 9 to try and squeeze it onto 2 pages. Use an 11 or 12 font. Is much better. Yes, that will take up a little bit more landscape on the page, but it will do better. When I see a resume that's a 9 font, I tend to not want to even read it. Not that it's an eye strain or anything, but it's just so small, it's like it's making it inconvenient for me. Margins of an inch are preferred. I see a lot of times people are using a margin of a ½ inch, and an applicant tracking system is most likely going to cut the ends of that document off. I think 75, 3/4 of an inch is the maximum that you really want to go. And definitely use standard terminology for all the section titles. It's work experience, not career achievements. Education, not professional training or Uh, Keywords found in your job description are just so critical. Another thing, a lot of times I'll see somebody's name and resume .doc. But what you really should do is maybe use your name and the job title that you're applying to. So like Bruce Bennett manager or BA Bennett training manager .doc, not BA Bennett resume .doc. And some industries are very acronym driven, but spell out the acronym, maybe put a bracket after the first usage so that you can refer to ION, because quite frankly, ION may not mean anything to other than somebody who worked at the specific company I did. So let's take a few minutes to look at some specific examples. Here's Baxter's website. And here you can see it says Baxter.com. But when you go to click on careers here, it actually takes you to applytracking.com. It has some script here to direct you from Baxter to the applicant tracking system vendor. So whenever you look up here, odds are you'll be able to identify which applicant tracking system you're being directed to rather than the company. Here's another example. This is a McHenry County employer. Follett, they do a lot of textbook production and such. And here you can see they're using ADP.com as their applicant tracking system. Here's another McHenry County employer. It's Aptar. It's a big operation down in Cary, and they actually use SAP, which is Success Factors. Now, if you'll note, it says successfactors.eu. Well, that's the European Union, because Aptar was bought out by a company in France. So when you apply to this company, you're actually applying over the European Union, even though everything's here local. That's just their system. Northwestern Medicine, another big McHenry County employer, and actually there's probably ones in Lake County as well. But here you can see it's Taleo, Northwestern Medicine, Taleo.net. And, you know, again, Taleo has the lion's share of the market. However, it is one of the more cumbersome for an applicant to apply. If you'll see here, there are different series of screens that you have to go through. In fact, here you go, step 1 of 6. So you're basically still just identifying your interests after a couple of screens. You know, here's the location preferences, page 2 of 3. And then here, too, now it's time to upload your resume. Well, you can import your profile data, or you can choose your file to upload. So it's a really multi-step process. And I and many other people have noticed that Taleo really does a horrible job in parsing your data. So it's got to be something in the formatting. I don't have any other explanation. Here's another employer in McHenry County, Snap-on. And here you can see that they're from iCIMS, is their applicant tracking system. Now, the thing that caught my eye about this particular career page is here's an opportunity to just submit your resume for general consideration. And I think most of those would probably end up in the round file. I think anytime that you want to be effective in your job search, rather than just submitting your resume, you really want to apply for a specific position, match up the keywords in the description and your resume to maximize your effectiveness at applying for a position. And again, most of these applicant tracking systems will want you to register and then log in. Now, the one thing about being in job search is important is networking. And maybe you find a position that it's not quite right for me, but you know, I met Jenny last week and she's looking for an account manager position. So maybe email this to a friend or share it on your news feed. Help others in job search mode as well. So where can you upload your resume? Any number of places. One thing that's not here is LinkedIn. I talk about it over here. And it's not like you would necessarily list your resume on LinkedIn. You would build out a profile that would have all the details from your resume and more on it. Facebook and such, you can find jobs there. Twitter, look at the corporate website. Now, there are some other vendors out there that will be happy to take your money and use their system as a means of finding a job. I did have a subscription for Ladders for about 6 months, but I never really benefited from it. So one thing you can do too to get a better visual impression of your resume is actually creating a Wordle.net. And if you'll notice, this is what I used on the cover slide to kind of emphasize a resume, experience, professional, duties, skills. And this is an actual visual representation of my resume that really has training, business, and some other LinkedIn, of course, is over here as well. So, and you can kind of edit your resume to create more of a visual representation of yourself. Maybe put it in a portfolio when you go in for an interview type thing. So it's basically a word diagram. And you can customize these in all kinds of different colors, formats, and such. Just a reference page for some of the different videos that we watched, or like in the last one, the pain letters, it's an article by Liz Ryan. I do a lot of work through the McHenry County Workforce Network. This is the link to their website. Here is a brochure that has a calendar of events and services. In fact, this month, resume critiques are highlighted, and here Dean has a couple of openings. Kathy doesn't have any. And then upcoming events at the Workforce Center is LinkedIn for your job search on Monday, LinkedIn strategic guidelines, resume cover letters and applying online will be on October 5th, which is basically this one, which will be a little bit more comprehensive. I'll be playing more of the videos and such. And then Guide to a Winning Interview on October 7th, where we really talk a lot about the role of preparation, self-awareness and such for your interview. And actually, we play several different videos about interviewing. And then Network to Success Job Club that I moderate. And the topic for Wednesday, October 14th, will be effective networking. Now, two things that I didn't list there are using social media in job search on Thursday, October 1st in the evening for St. Joseph's Employment Ministry. And then LinkedIn Basics and Best Practices Tuesday, October 6th here for the Lakeville District Library, where Nina and I will be online again. And with that, we'll throw it open to any questions. Here is my contact information. And at this point, I don't know, Nina, do you want me to stop sharing before I leave this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, looks like we got about 8 people who stayed on, a couple people jumped off. I don't see anything in the chat or any Q&A yet. So maybe people are typing, I don't know.
Okay.
We can wait and see. Good program, Bruce, very nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
You know, the library, we have a subscription to something called Reference USA, which you can get company information, and it is linked to Indeed as well. So that would be on that resources page that I showed everybody on the at the beginning of the program. You just it's pretty it's a really nice research tool. You can find out who to direct your resume to. You can find out about the business. It's very nice. It's called Reference USA. Oh, we got a chat.
Yes, we
Don't
do.
include a picture on the resume, Elena.
Normally, I would not include a picture. It is an option, though. It all depends. Most people don't like revealing themselves. At the same point in time, that's a really good question. Is it a requirement or standard practice to have a LinkedIn account? If you're in job search mode, and even if you're not, I think it's a wise decision to have a LinkedIn profile. And again, it depends upon your role. If you're a customer service representative, yes. If you're in construction, you're a construction manager or estimator, yes, I think that. There's not many roles that I can think of right off the hand that don't really necessarily need a LinkedIn profile. I've seen police officers, emergency tech, nurses, doctors, a long list of different individuals who have accounts.
Vishali's asking if she should highlight skills in a resume.
When you say highlight, I assume you don't mean necessarily highlight it with like a yellow marker or a yellow thing. You don't need to do that. The applicant tracking system will pull those out for an employer.
Heather's asking, she says, thank you for this helpful information. You said we can get a copy of this presentation with the links if we email you, correct?
That would be correct. That would be the best way. You will probably be able to find this on SlideShare if you look for Bruce Bennett. It'll take me a few minutes to actually upload it and stuff. And I think the chronological format is the most common these days. Infographic has still got a ways to come. I would say it's probably only 10% of the resumes at most that I see are the infographic. Most of them are the traditional chronological formatting. Oh, one other thing. I'm shocked I didn't say this. The applicant tracking system will not really take the infographic resume. Its success rate at being integrated and scanned is not nearly as good as a chronological format.
That's good to know.
Yeah. It's perfect for marketing yourself at a job fair or in a situation where you're actually emailing somebody directly or handing them in a face-to-face interview. It really works well. But for applying online, it may not work nearly as well as you would like.
Okay, well, that looks like it's that's it, Bruce. Looks like we're
Alrighty.
good. So thank you, everyone. This will be uploaded to the library's YouTube channel early next week, probably Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay. Thanks very much for coming on Zoom. See, there are cool things happening even during a pandemic. So I think we can end it here. Have a great weekend, Bruce. Good luck to you in with your real estate transactions. And we'll see you October 6th.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.